Hi, welcome audience. I think we've got you all on here. I am Andy Richardson. I'm the general manager at Fountain Bookstore. If those of you who don't know me, we are so lucky today. We have some amazing romance writers right now. We have Sandra Kitt, Evie Dunmore, Alyssa Cole, and Joanna Lowell. And people are here to see you and hear you all talk, not me. So I would love it if you would each tell us a little bit about your books. Sandra, let's start with you.
Okay, if we're talking about the most recent one, it's called Winner Takes All, and it's the first book of a trilogy whose theme is money, how we get it when we don't earn it. The theme is titled The Millionaire's Club. And so all of the stories are connected by way of the protagonist coming into a great deal of money. And so far, getting very good feedback from Winner Takes All, nice emails, nice letters from former editors and people all over the place. So that's good.
Yeah, I'm reading it now myself, and I'm also really enjoying it.
Thank you.
It's a real fun story. Evie, how about you? Tell us about your series. Actually, we've got several for you.
Yeah, thank you. So I write historical romance based in the Victorian era in the United Kingdom. And it's called The League of Extraordinary Women, and it centers a group of female suffragists who are trying to get, more rights for women at a time where women had very few rights. And along the way, they fall in love with men who end up supporting their cause. And I'm super excited about my upcoming novel called Portrait of a Scotsman. It's the third in the series. And after I finished it, I thought, this is really a Hades and Persephone retelling. And that's how I'd probably sum it up for people in a nutshell who are interested in reading it.
That's awesome. And I'm actually going to have an awkward moment here. I neglected to thank our sponsor for this panel, Sam Millers. And we are super excited that Sam Millers is giving away some gift cards. So after you hear this amazing panel, if you check out their expo booth, Sam Miller's Restaurant, you can be one of 4 people to win a $50 gift card, which is pretty exciting. So thank you, Sam Millers. And now back to the program. Alyssa, tell us about your upcoming romance.
I had my mic off because anyone who sees an event with me during the pandemic knows there are roosters, dogs, and all kinds of animals in the background.
All good.
My upcoming book is How to Find a Princess, and it is book 2 in the Runaway Royals, which is a spinoff of the Reluctant Royals. So it's basically like the even more reluctant royals. And this book is How to Find a Princess is a queer Anastasia retelling. More Anastasia, like the movie, not the actual terrible, tragic.
It's probably for the best.
And it's about one woman who is a people pleaser, a super healthy people pleaser who decides she is going to stop being that. But actually, you can't just tell yourself you're going to stop being a certain way. Who also has a family lore of her grandmother had a brief fling with a prince from a royal family from a small island in the Mediterranean called Iberania, which is made up like most of the places in my royal series. And it had really negative outcome when her mother found this out. When she was a kid, her mom became obsessed with it and their royal lineage. So she absolutely hates anything to do with royalty. And then, of course, the other heroine is Iberanian, and she is descended from the Iberanian Royal Guard. She works for the World Federation of Monarchists and is taking part, not quite with permission, in the search for the possible missing heir of the Iberanian royal family. She's very determined to bring this, Makeda in, and then they go on a transatlantic cargo ship trip because I was like, I want to write about a transatlantic cargo ship trip. So far people have really been enjoying it and saying it's the most thing I hear back is that it's fun and delightful, which is awesome because it's the first book I wrote completely during the pandemic, so it was like not in fun and delightful times, and I'm glad people are getting some joy out of that.
it is a lot of fun, and I love the grandmother. She's I'm a big fan. Joanna, tell us about The Duke Undone.
Hi. Well, first, thank you for having me. I was like swoony about this invitation. I'm a big fan of all of your work, so this is really exciting for me. And you also, yeah, exactly. I'm on the same Damn Girl page, and there's something going on in my neighborhood. It's a art walk, and so there's actually a bagpiper wandering around. So you might hear bagpipes. It goes.
They're
really
getting
well.
us ready for Evie's next book. That's amazing.
Maybe we're going to hear bagpipes and roosters. It's really exciting.
I knew this panel was going to be amazing. Y'all are not disappointing me.
So the Duke Undone is the first book in a series. It's also set in the Victorian era in the 1880s in the UK, and it's set there. The books are set in and around the Victorian art world, and the Duke Undone follows a young painter who's trying to make her name at a time when the Royal Academy of Art and other, well, particularly the Royal Academy of Art where she's studying, didn't offer life classes, like opportunities to draw from the nude to female students. And so female students didn't have parity when it came to their artistic training. And she stumbles upon a naked man in an alleyway. And so she seizes her opportunity. She can't sort of banish his gorgeous form from her mind, and she paints him, and then has to sell her picture due to her straitened financial circumstances. And he turns out to be a duke who is very angsty and trying to repair his family. And so it's sort of an enemies to lovers romance.
So fun. And I have just started yours as well. So I'm at various places in all of y'all's books. So I'm trying to keep it all straight in my head. It's been a lot of fun preparing for this, though, I have to say. It's a good job. So I love that we have a mix with you all, with some Victorian times or some times historical versus modern day. So I would love to hear how you chose that. And Sandra, let's start with you. How did you select your setting and your time for this?
Well, first of all, I've always written contemporary novels from the start of my career up until the present day. I love reading historicals, but I've actually never been interested in writing them. I feel that, there's a lot of people out there writing historicals, and that's fine. And when I write about contemporary issues, I'm actually also kind of preparing to write about the future, because I'm actually very much paying attention to the way the country is changing demographically, how we are redefining who's an American, how we're redefining relationships, and that kind of thing. So I'm very much based in the contemporary times. When I came up with the concept of the Millionaires Club, to me, it was an obvious decision that it had to be contemporary, because I wanted to kind of explore two things. Number one, the way people come into a great deal of money, as I said before, that they did not earn. And the first book, Winner Takes All, takes one of the very first primary reasons, which is they win the lottery. But I also wanted to explore, what do people do when they have that much money that they didn't expect to come into? And I wanted to take it beyond just having money to spend until you drop, and get everything you want. You buy an island, you buy a plane, you buy a boat, the whole 9 yards. What else do you want to do with your money? And so the whole idea of the Millionaires Club is that it's different kinds of stories, different ways people come into money, and then decide what else they want to do with their good fortune that doesn't involve spending all the money on themselves. So it was kind of a challenge to figure out, what do people think they want to spend money on when they become suddenly very wealthy? In conjunction with something that Alyssa just said, the second book that I just turned in on the trilogy, which is called The Time of Your Life, was written entirely during the pandemic. So that's what kept me busy and really sane in 2020, although I sometimes refer to this year as 2020.2, because we're still dealing with an awful lot of stuff. So, and again, it's just a different story in which and in this case, it wasn't just one person, but both the he and she came into a great deal of money and sort of, conferred together. Well, what do we do? We have all of this money. What do we do with it? So it was just thinking in terms of beyond being a millionaire or a billionaire. How are you thinking beyond that in terms of your ability to spend money? And it all comes down to really, are they willing to be philanthropic? Are they willing to look beyond their own lives to the lives of people who don't have what they have? So that's what I was concentrating on.
So I like that it's romance, which is still fun and lovey, but you've got some human study in there too, and some. Yeah, that's great. So Alyssa, I'm going to come to you next because you also keep a contemporary timeline. So how did you? What draws you to that?
So for me, I write all different kinds of things, and in romance, I write historical romance too. And for this series, I wanted it to be contemporary, but I also like playing it with it's contemporary with historical tropes, in Reluctant Royals and Runaway Royals. So in Runaway Royals especially, it's kind of historical with a bit of fantasy, even though it's contemporary. So in How to Catch a Queen, it's marriage of convenience from, with a Highland king, except it's African Highlands. And in modern day times. And then in How to Find a Princess, it's royal bodyguard and her princess in modern times, but with throwbacks to kind of some of the aspects that we enjoy from historical romance and fantasy romance. And for this one, I like, for Runaway Royals and Reluctant Royals, I kept it contemporary because I kind of really wanted to have fun with the idea of princes. I mean, there are modern day princes and princes and princesses, and royalty, as has become, much more in the news over the last few years. And, when I first started writing the book, it was basically a Cinderella story because it plays with fairy tales too. And just a modern day woman who's going through a lot of things and suddenly finds out that this fan mail that she's getting saying she's betrothed to an African prince is real. So it's kind of like taking these fun tropes and then integrating them into a somewhat realistic modern world. And it's also fun, like getting to make up kingdoms and basically creating this world. Like Sandra said, kind of taking things, because you have to look at the, politics and the way the world is changing and kind of all of these different aspects, in addition to the romance and the romance tropes and making it fun and, or angsty, depending on the story, and, pulling that all together to create the world for the book. So for the Runaway Royals, I felt like it was fun to have this contemporary world where, it's someone who could be us. The heroine of one of the heroines is working at a supermarket at the beginning of How to Find a Princess, and she loves her job at the supermarket and she gets fired and it sucks for her. But kind of, one day you could be working at the supermarket, the next, like, a chaotic investigator is busting into your house telling you that you're a princess. So I think it's just fun to kind of have that idea of our everyday life could at any moment be kind of turned on its head in an exasperating, but also fun and way and lead to a happily ever after.
Yeah, absolutely. So Evie, yours are more historical. Tell us how you chose that for your Extraordinary Women.
So I've always really been fascinated by history. I like museums and I like reading historical fiction. And the Victorian era, I think, for me, so there's several reasons why it's so fascinating to me. So one is that a lot of the classics that I like come from Victorian authors like Oscar Wilde, the Bronte sisters, even Thomas Hardy. So I think this feeling for the Victorian era has been, there through the books that I liked. And on the other hand, it's a really fascinating time period where so many modern ideas that we have today, about women's rights, workers' rights, atheism, really communism, socialism, all these ideas, they really started coming to the people in the Victorian era in Britain. So And at the same time, you had a very restricted society that existed in parallel to all these ideas and technological developments and medical advances. You know, you had a very narrow-minded mindset, and it was very discriminating against women and minorities. So that clash of ideas and how things were and how they were going to be is a very interesting tension, I think. And when the idea for my first novel, Bringing Down the Duke, first came to me, I very quickly realized that if my heroine was going to, fall in love with the hero and marry him, she'd lose most of her rights over herself, because that was the law in 1880s Britain. You know, as a woman, if you married, you became subsumed in your husband's legal persona. You lost your property to him unless you had like provisions that only very rich women could afford. And I didn't think that was very romantic, especially since voting laws at the time were tied to property qualifications. So even if you were a man, but you didn't pay a certain amount of rent in a big city or own property, you couldn't vote. And I mean, voting is essential, right? You vote on the laws that determine your daily life. And all these things just made me think, well, when the heroine came to me as a hero, I knew it was historical, but I wasn't entirely sure what time period. And then it just all became very clear. I was like, okay, she needs to be at least in the Victorian era, where women's suffrage had already picked up some momentum. There was some organizing going on, so she could authentically fight for her rights and have all these ideas that helped us, get some more rights today even. So that's how it all came together. I think like a long, underlying fascination with the Victorian period, and then realizing that my heroines, if they're historical, need to at least be doing something about their rights.
I love that. Very inspiring. And Joanna, how about you?
Yeah, no, all of this really is chiming for me. And the Victorian era has also always been fascinating for me. I grew up reading Victorian novels and also a lot of historical romances. My dad had a pizza shop, and there was a library that was always having like a fire sale on books down the street. So I would go and take change from the till and then buy all the 10-cent books, which were usually historical romance novels. And so they just kind of got into me that way. So it was something that felt, very much like it was coming out of what I'd read. But the Victorian period, for the reasons that Evie's naming, the contradictions and the political and social change, it, I think, gives you an opportunity to, this is also picking up on what Sandra was saying, sort of paradoxically, writing contemporary to kind of imagine the future, but there's something about writing the past that kind of can allow us to like work out certain things about the present also. Like what were patriarchal norms at that time and how are they contested? The British Empire, like British imperialism is like maxing out in this, this time period. And in the Duke Undone, one of the things that the hero is grappling with is the Second Anglo-Afghan War that he was a part of, and thinking about that sort of the sort of personal consequences of that war for him, but then also how that is playing out socially and politically. And so, I don't know, there's something about historical fiction which is really fun for me because of the the opportunities to do research. I'd never really been to England, and I teach at a university, and so because I had this project, I got funding from the university to go to London and go to the archives of the Royal Academy, and there was a royal archivist, and I got to like read petitions that women were circulating to try to get access to classes that they were being denied access to. And so all of that was really exciting, and it just sort of feeds my writing process. But then there is something about having that that kind of like closed circle of like the this particular year or decade in the 19th century, and imagining characters then. And it's going to, I think, for me, and I think for a lot of people who write historical fiction, it sort of also shines a light on the present and the same kinds of power struggles that are going on today.
And so you're all making this really easy on me. My last panel did too. You're all segging into my next question. So I'm thinking somebody had a cheat sheet, and I'm grateful. So you were talking about the research that you got to do, and because it sounds like it was fun research, that's why I say got to. So since all of your books are so different, all 4 of you, I would love to know more about your research process. And Evie, we'll start with you on this one. Uh-oh. No pressure. We're all
I mute myself unexpectedly. So yes, I think as Joanna said, the research is some of the is the fun part and can be really inspiring for the writing process. At the same time, it's also a really dangerous rabbit hole to go down, because it's very easy to procrastinate the actual writing by researching, because it's all somehow relevant for the novel, but then again you need to write it, so that much about research. But yes, so what I've done is I would say that around 25 to 30% of my writing time actually goes into research, because I try and do a lot of world building. So some of the really minute details that are accurate and that you just read in like 1 second that contribute to world building, I do need to do a lot of research on that to see how it fits in. So how do I do that? Well, I do primary source research, and I do more broad, research on Victorian life. And the things that I really focused on were 2 things: women in higher education, because the series takes place at Oxford with the first cohort of women at Oxford University in the 1880s. And the other thing is to look into the women's suffrage movement at the time. And when I started researching for Bringing Down the Duke, I didn't really find a lot of information online on the first women at Oxford University, which surprised me, but there wasn't that much interest in them. So I went back to Oxford and I went to the first women's college, Lady Margaret Hall, and they were very nice. They let me go into the archives and, dig up all the picture albums and the pamphlets and the diaries, and it was really, really helpful to get an idea of who were the type of women who would enroll at university in 1879. Because today it doesn't sound that amazing to go to uni, I think, for a woman, but in 1879 that was very rebellious in a way, and nobody really knew what you were going to do with it. At the same time, women at the time knew they needed an education, because there literally weren't enough men to go around to marry them and provide for them. As Joanna said, the empire was blowing up at the time, and lots of men were gone. They were abroad, or they were emigrating, or they were hurt by war and just not in the position to marry and provide for a wife. Anyway, I'm going off a tangent here, but so there was a need for higher education, and it was very interesting to learn about the type of woman who took up a degree. And for the suffrage movement, I worked a lot with digital sources. The London School of Economics has an amazing women's library, all digitalized. And if you're interested, you can just go there and look up endless amounts of suffrage minutes, pamphlets, essays, everything you need to know to get a feeling for the women at the time who were interested in women's rights. Yeah.
That's great. And Alyssa, I'm going to go to you next, because I'm curious about your research, since especially in the recent books, you've kind of made up the setting. So is that easier because you don't have to research, or is it harder because you have to keep track of what you've made up?
It's never easier. No matter what I'm writing, I am always generally doing the same amount of research, even if less of that research will be apparent in the book. So if I'm writing historical, sci-fi, anything that I just like researching, and also I couldn't stop, even that's the problem for me, being able to stop and start to write the book. But for to talk about the Royal series, so I have my general baseline of what I know about history, what I know about politics, and all of that, like every writer, their baseline experiences. And then for each book, I kind of try to, when I make up a kingdom, I look at the location and I try and look at the surrounding actual countries and thinking about the histories of those countries, the religions of those countries. Because even if I'm making something up, I don't want to just like I try to balance between respect, you know, looking at what the surrounding regions are. In this case, it was like the Mediterranean, so it was water. Not quite the same as the other places I made up, but I try to look at respect. I try not to just copy and paste those places, and I make up religions for the most part. I make up languages sometimes, like obviously based in real languages, so that the reader has some context of what they are reading. Even though, like with one language, someone thought I was just writing German incorrectly, and I was like, no. I understand. I was like, yeah, it was because Lichtenbergish in A Prince on Paper is like a mix of French and German, and I did try to use like, you know, send. Okay, I'm not gonna get into that. So I try to think. And also about what could have happened in the past that is in this kind of alternate world, because it's like our world, but not quite our world. There are some things that are different, including, you know, these countries that I'm making up, and these kingdoms that I'm making up, but things like, okay, was this place colonized? Yes or no? Did this place colonize anywhere else? Yes or no? How did they handle that in the past, or how are they handling it right now? What religion do they have? Are they a mostly secular place, or do they have a strong, like, is their religion a strong part of every people's everyday lives? And for How to Find a Princess, I made up a Mediterranean island called Iberania. And the backstory for that island is that it is an island the kingdom was started basically by a pirate queen who, she was a pirate who, and a lot of it is like, you know, I read a lot of history and I kind of that I like from it. And, you know, she was forced to marry the king, and then she kills him. And starts her own kingdom. And so it's kind of like a matriarchal kingdom based on this pirate queen who, and in this book I actually went into it a bit less than I do in other books, but like drawing on the history of the region, which is you know, there are Muslim countries, there's there's Greece, and there's countries, and the different ways that there's Malta, and kind of, you know, so kind of drawing on bits from all of those places, but also what if the island was populated by the indigenous people from that region and Africans from across Africa, and like how that would affect the island. So yeah, just a lot of research, and then kind of putting it all in a bag and shaking it together and figuring out how to put it together.
And Sandra, how about you? I love the idea of the lottery winner. Did you talk to anybody that was in that position, or did you just get to kind of go wild and imagine it?
No, I didn't get to talk to anyone who'd won the lottery, including myself, but I did do a lot of research. And I have to say that I absolutely love doing research. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, I think I always know I'm going to learn something. If I take the time to research a subject or person that I know nothing about, I am going to come away knowing more than I did going in. And that's, to me, that's always been very, very exciting. And I'm not interested in, you know, I keep reading, like Alyssa said, I keep reading and doing research. And then you sort of think, okay, I'm really getting more information than I actually need for the book. But then you can't stop because it's so fascinating. And you're gaining all of this material. And my objective is not to put all of those facts and statistics into a book. I only want to sound like I'm reasonably authentic, so that if someone reads what I've written, they know that, you know, I know the subject, or I certainly have researched it quite a bit. I don't want someone coming back to me and say, you know, that section you had on whatever is really not the way it happened or the way it should be. I'm very, very careful about spending the time to do the research I need. And one of my favorite ways, of course, is to do interviews. Because when you talk to someone who's an expert, you get to point, counterpoint. You know, they answer one question and then immediately you have one or two new questions, and it just kind of keeps going like that. I like that kind of interchange. And over the years of my career, one of the things I did come to know was that people who are an expert in something really love to talk about what they do and what they know. So whether I was talking to a police officer to find out what police do, and I'm not talking present day, they were just wonderful about sitting with me and answering any questions, even the provocative ones that I had about being a police officer and, the whole structure of the institution, as opposed to what they actually do when they're out in the street working with people. For the winner takes all, in terms of the lottery, I did do research basically on what happens to people from the lottery when they make a lot of money. And you have those really few horror stories of someone who makes, $3 million, and by the end of the year, they've blown through it and they have no more money. But what I found surprisingly is most people who have won the lottery do two things. First of all, they don't tell anybody, which is,
Smart.
You do not talk about it, because that opens up the floodgates for people tracking you down and trying to figure out how to separate you from your money. But the other thing is, the very, very first thing that's on their mind is, how do I take care of my family? Do I get a house for mom? Do I make sure the kids have college funds? Do I pay off student loans, and take care of all the bills? So that's a very practical end of having a lot of money, even before they decide to just do fun things like buy a couple of things that they really, really want. That was interesting to find out. So I really do spend a lot of time in doing research. The first book takes place in New York. I was born and raised in New York City, and I really know the city very well. But for the book, I end up doing a fair amount of research on helicopters, how to lease a private plane, what you see on the land when you're flying along the Hudson Valley, going up towards Albany, what's up there, because it all factored into the things the hero and heroine did together that came about because he had all of this money and he wanted to show her some of the things that he knew in the city. And that was kind of fun to do. Then I had them go off to a romantic 10-day vacation on Turks and Caicos. So all of this research on Turks and Caicos, and now it's on my short list of places that I absolutely have to get to.
Yes,
because it sounds so romantic and so fantastic. And it was fun to do that because all of us are readers as well as being writers. So when you're doing this research, it's kind of like it all comes to life behind your eyes, like a movie screen. So I began to see myself in the way that the hero and heroine were seeing things. And that made it very interesting. And I'm thinking, oh, I got to go there. This place sounds really
for research.
So I really, really enjoy researching very, very much. For the third book of my trilogy, I haven't decided actually what city it's going to take place in, because a lot of it depends on a certain kind of FBI field office. And the hero in that particular book is an FBI agent. And I have connected with an FBI agent at headquarters in DC, and we have a regular correspondence going. We call each other. He answers my email. So I'm getting a lot of firsthand information, and I'm kind of wearing him down so I can get a little bit more, personal and less technical.
Yes.
But all of that will factor into the book as well. So I enjoy it very, very much.
It sounds like you do, and it sounds like you are all so hardworking, and I think that that's reflected in the books too. You can tell you all really did your work. Joanna, tell us about your research. I know you got to travel for it, so that was really exciting. What else? What else do you do to prepare and lay your lid?
It was really exciting. I also do primary research, sort of archival stuff, which you can do in person in the real life archive before 2020. And, if you are lucky enough to be able to travel. And also, things that are digitized, like being able to look at old newspapers and things of that sort. But for the Duke Undone and for the other books in the series, I've also done some reading just around different pre-Raphaelite painters, some of their journals. The Duke Undone kind of flips that the kind of conventional story around the pre-Raphaelites, which features a kind of bohemian male painter and a female muse. And in this case, the man is the muse and the woman is the painter. But I spent some time reading around in different biographies, and also a lot of like really dry accounts of the Municipal Board of Works around sort of urban planning in late 19th century London, because one of the aspects of the book is the heroine dealing with her home being foreclosed on, and it's part of slum clearances, as they were called, that were happening from in 1875 and then into the 20th century. And so it was, which is kind of like your eyes, just my eyes would just go in all directions, just trying to like read through. But it's amazing how certain details do, like Sandra was saying, just make a story come to life. And that's one of the joys, I think, of research, is that some errant detail just like snaps everything into focus, or you just see the narrative possibility when you find it. And I'll also read like Victorian novels or something to kind of help me with a certain like mood. Like I was reading like a lot of Wilkie Collins for the Duke of Sun, and also being able to talk to experts, or people that have an expertise which is adjacent to what you're doing. Because I'm in an English department, and there are lots of folks who specialize in the Victorian era, or Jane Austen or something like that. And it doesn't necessarily mean they know like the daily life questions that I think, as when you're writing fiction, sometimes you just hit the stumbling block of like, well, how long did it actually take on the boat in 1881 to go from Dover to Calais, or something like that? And then you ask like the scholar of of the literature of the period, and they don't know either. Or I have a friend who I was pestering nonstop with legal questions about inheritance law in the 19th century. He's an ACLU attorney. He was like, you shouldn't be talking to me. Nothing you're saying is making sense. They yawned. But yeah, so I mean, but it's just also fun to bring people into the world of the book and to get to bounce ideas around. And so I think that that's a really important component. But I also don't always know when to stop, because there's just so much, and those rabbit holes are so appealing.
It's fascinating. It's because if you're writing about it, you're interested in it. So yeah, you want to learn all you can, because it's just so fascinating. So let's talk about tropes now. I would love to know what your favorite or most fun trope to write is. And Alyssa, we're going to start with you on this one.
I'm trying to think. My favorite trope. I think the most fun for me is, it's not opposites attract, but it's the trope that's in this book in How to Find a Princess as well, which is order Muppet falls for chaos Muppet, and vice versa. Which is, someone who just is doing whatever they want, not necessarily in a bad way. And the other protagonist is someone who follows the rules, and you have to follow the rules, and the other character is like, why? And how they come together. I don't know if that's an actual trope, but I guess so. Opposites attract, but I call it order Muppet versus chaos Muppet, because it's like a specific subdivision, subset of opposites attract, because they're not necessarily opposite. They could have the same goal, but they just go about it. One goes about it in an orderly way, and the other one goes about it in a chaotic and possibly nonsensical to other people way. And yeah, I also enjoy fake relationships. This book has a fake marriage because I feel like there's fake dating, and then you get fake marriage, and kind of just that concept of people being thrown together for a reason, and having to pretend to care about each other, but it only works within romance because you as the reader understand that they actually do like each other in some way. In another genre, it would be like a horror story. But within romance, the idea of two people who are going to work well with one another, fighting that initial attraction or pretending that it's not happening because they're in denial for some reason. So like forced proximity, fake dating.
Nice. Joanna, how about you? What are some of your most fun favorite tropes?
Also really love forced proximity, and I also love fake relationships. I think I like trickery in general, and I know that that's sometimes a dicey proposition because romance novels, they're about mutuality and building trust and interdependence, and if somebody is deceiving you, that's that it's not necessarily sympathetic, and it kind of makes but if it's done well, I think mistaken identity is one that I really love, because I think identity questions are sort of at the center of romance. It's like people sort of gaining agency, negotiating power, doing all of these things, learning about themselves and who they are in relation to others. And so I think a mistaken identity story can kind of foreground all of that. I mean, I just like Unmasking the Marquess by Kate Sebastian, I think, is one of my favorite mistaken identity romances, because that mistaken identity, or the assumed identity, it enables the character to become who they really are. And I just feel like that sort of move is really awesome. But yeah, I mean, there are so many that are really fun. I like, Chaos Muppet and Order Muppet. I mean,
I think that's my new favorite just because of the wording. I love it. Sandra, how about you? What are some of your favorites?
Okay, I don't know if they're tropes either, but one of the things that I realized is pretty much a theme with the characters in a lot of my stories is that I set them up to be a certain way, and their personalities are presented fairly early on. So the reader kind of knows what he is like and kind of knows what she is like, and then what draws them together. But I really like, as you move along, where they surprise each other and turns out that there's more to each of them than they ever expected. And that becomes much, much more attractive because they each have basically not read each other thoroughly enough to really know each other. So, it takes on that journey as they're arcing and getting through the story, they're learning more and more about each other. And every new thing that they learn is surprising, is fun, is romantic, whatever the case may be. In Winner Takes All, the heroine, she and the hero knew each other in high school. She actually tutored him in high school. He was 2 years ahead of her, but she was brilliant in some subjects, and she was paired with him to get him through his senior year. And there was nothing romantic about them, although secretly she did find him very attractive and wondered if he was attracted to her. But basically, they just got along as friends in school. And that set the tone for what they knew and will come to know about each other when they finally met up again years later, because they had this little tiny bit of foundation. However, the way they knew each other in high school is not the way they are now as adults. So they're learning each other all over again. And I like playing with that in whether it's this book or any other books. And when I start thinking about it, I realize that that's a kind of juxtaposition that I've used often in my books, where you think you know the characters, when the book opens, and then 4 or 5 chapters later, you go, oh, I never saw that coming, because something else emerges in their personality or their character or their motivation or what they're capable of doing that you didn't think that they were capable of doing early on. So I like playing with that a lot, where, I pull out little surprises in their personality. And sometimes those changes or that appearance of those new personalities happen because they're playing off of each other, and they're trying to form the relationship, and they're trying to get through barriers and trust each other. And yes, there are conflicts, but basically everything they need in terms of forming a relationship is there. They're just still constantly discovering what all of those elements are. So I find that challenging and really a lot of fun to work on, because every character that you create in whatever book, they all are different. You know, you try to make sure that not all of your females sound alike and not all of your heroes sound alike. So coming up with these unique characteristics is a challenge, but I think it's part of what makes it fun to work on these people.
Absolutely. Evie, how about you?
Yeah, so if when I'm reading a novel and the writing voice really grips me and really speaks to me, you can sell me almost any trope, I think, and I'm going to love it because, you know, the voice engages me and I love seeing what they do with it. When it comes to writing, what I noticed is that, I mean, so far I've only written 3.5 books, but I always write something enemies to lovers like, for on the one hand, that is, I think, because there's a special kind of tension between people who may be attracted to each other on a pheromonal level, but who don't actually really like each other as people. So there's a special chemistry there, literally. And the other reason why I think I'm so drawn to that trope links very much into what Sandra says. It's about people discovering who they really are and therefore falling in love with each other. Because much of my enemies to lovers, or actually all of them, are based on a misunderstanding in the sense that they approach each other with some sort of preconceived notion on the one hand, and on the other hand, the characters don't interact when they're in their true essence with each other. They are wearing their mask. You know, we all wear masks throughout the day. We wear masks with different people. And I think one of the truly magical things about actually finding a partner who, you know, is special is when they see you the way you see yourself and you can be around them the way you are. You don't have to wear a mask. And I think enemies to lovers kind of pushes that to a very, how do you say? I don't know the expression. Like it makes it very, it brings it to the maximum extreme, really, that you're wearing your mask, and it's all the more satisfying when the characters come to a point where they are themselves with each other, and maybe, as Sandra also said, you know, bring out themselves more even in relationship to one another. So I think that's why personally writing enemies to lovers is quite satisfying for me as a writer. But also, as Joanna said, you know, you have to kind of be reasonable, because if my hero did something absolutely unforgivable to my heroine, then I'm not sure how I'd make it romantic for them. I'm not sure I could, you know, do that. So yeah, if I had to pick a trope, it's probably some sort of enemies to lovers. But again, I love all of them if they're written in a way that appeals to me.
Absolutely. And Kelly has reminded us that Sam Miller's, our sponsor for this panel, is giving away 4 $50 gift cards. So don't forget to enter for your chance. I have been informed that I am not allowed to enter. Kelly's letting me know she's removing me from the entry. So someone go get yourself a nice gift certificate. So I would like to talk a little bit about the romance genre. We are huge fans of romance here at Fountain. We sell books of all types, but one of our biggest and most active book clubs is Fountain Flirt. They're a romance book club, and they focus on diversity in the genre. And I know several of you have had books in their lineup or have upcoming books in their lineup, so you have all been featured here. Our goal is really to fight that negative, the sort of the judginess that comes along with romance. Some people don't give it the respect that it deserves, and I think all they would need to do is listen to you talk about the work and the research you put into it. But what do you all do to combat that? How do you kind of get through the judginess that surrounds the genre? And Joanna, we'll start with you this time.
I mean, yeah, the judginess that surrounds romance. I mean, we could have a whole panel about, you know, the history of the genre and its reception, and why, why books that center emotional life, or that have a happy ending, or that, you know, demonstrate that that sort of like love isn't just a feeling, it's a practice. Like all of the things about romance, like it's largely written by women, read by women. It's not written by serious white men, like that that kind of thing. I mean, there's like so much baggage around the genre. So I mean, I just think a lot of it is, sexist assumptions, patriarchy. I mean, it's just on a very fundamental level. And maybe even just like going into like ideas about, like originality, like the idea that, coming from a certain kind of like prestige literary critical perspective, that books are supposed to all be original in a very particular way, and there's supposed to be some sort of like anxiety of influence, where I think this is Ursula Le Guin's phrase, but work could also have an ecstasy of influence, and the idea that romance writers are in conversation with each other, or sort of iterating similar stories, like giving opportunities for us to return an imaginative play to like work out some of the same or similar fantasies, and to repair. I mean, romantic narratives are in books that aren't marketed as romance as well. I mean, so I did a lot of, I went through like an academic training as a writer. Like I have an MFA and I did a PhD, and so there's a certain like idea that there's like serious literature, and then there's like the genre literature, or like the genre not literature rather. And I just think breaking all of that down is really important. And I think we've seen more of it around science fiction and mystery, and less of it around romance. And I think that is because of the happily ever after, the emphasis on emotion, and then the fact that it's like, it's driven by women. So, I mean, I think just for romance writers and readers to like keep doing what they're doing, but also to keep asking questions about it and try to do what we're doing better. I think, is important. And probably, I mean, there's always going to be judges.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Alyssa, what do you think?
I have a lot of thoughts on this, but to sum it up, I think a lot of Western society doesn't like happiness. Like as a society, happiness is not looked, you're supposed to work hard, you're supposed to suffer. And when it comes to literature, pop culture, and when I say happiness too, I mean emotional happiness and emotional well-being. And the majority of romance is really focusing on the emotional cultivation of the protagonist and the other people in their lives. And for some people, that really causes a kind of dissonance and a kind of like deep discomfort to read about people, because obviously there are other things going on in romances, and all, there are different plots, there are different subplots, and they take place over the spectrum of time, dimension, and everything. But the constant is the search. I mean, and I would say sex, but not even all. Like we talk about, the sex factor a lot, and people talk about all romances don't have sex scenes. A lot of them are closed door. So it's not even like, it's that there's misogyny and there's the patriarchy, but there's also like this kind of societal discomfort with emotion and with discussing relationships. Like most people are kind of just shoved into like there's that one side of like, okay, as a society, you're supposed, they tell people you're supposed to have a relationship, you're supposed to get married, and like all of that stuff. There are no instruction manuals. There's no like really deep conversation on a societal level about what that is. It's just something you're supposed to do. And the emotional aspect, even in 2021, is often not really taken into consideration in the way you would think it would be. Like obviously in individual pockets of discussion they are, and there are people, there are self-help books and all of these kind of things, and now podcasts and all of that. But like in general, it's not like something that is, and that's also tied to mental health discussions. Okay, I could get really into this, but there's this discomfort with emotional well-being and like going through emotions, but also how I deal with it. I never try to convince someone to read a romance, because if you think that telling me that you don't read a particular genre of book is supposed to make you look smarter, it does not. I'm just like, okay, cool. The fact that you think that's something to brag about is good for you. And it's fine if someone just like is like, okay, I read them and I don't like it, but there's a particular kind of like relish that some people say it with that I'm just like, okay, cool, you're missing a lot of books. I'm not gonna waste my time. I don't care what you read. So that's it.
Love it. Evie, how about you?
Yeah, I think actually Alyssa, Joanna summed it up really well. I have very little to add there. I'm lucky that my immediate circle of friends and family is very supportive of my writing. Like, I haven't been, sneered at once for writing romance. They're just like, oh gosh, you're writing actual books, like with pages and a cover, and it's in bookshops. So they're just impressed and have been very supportive. So I'm very happy about that. And if anyone were to say something negative, I'd just be like, yeah, well, romance is laughing all the way to the bank, to be honest, because it's $1 billion business. And I mean, do you want to be read widely and sell many books, or do you want to have, I don't know. It's a legitimate genre, and it takes a lot of craftiness to write it. And I don't feel like justifying myself for writing or enjoying reading it, to be honest. I think it's something that helps a lot of people in different stages of life to read it. It is extremely hard to write. So at least allow me to write a happy ending that makes it fun for me to write it.
Absolutely.
So that's all I'd say. And one thing to add, I think it's links a bit to what Joanna said, maybe that there's a maybe leftover patriarchal notions about it. But when I was still interested in reviews during my debut, because that's, after that I stopped being interested in reviews in any sort of way. But sometimes what I noticed during my debut was that especially some women readers felt that there was a contradiction between being a smart woman and being a woman who was stupid in love. Or there was a contradiction between being an independent woman and actually like enjoying passion. And that is something very interesting for me, because I really don't think that there is a contradiction. I think the challenge is, even in today's society, to bring the two together, to kind of have your shot at having it all. And I think it's very interesting that sometimes something what some women readers seem to feel. And I think you can be smart and you can enjoy love. There's absolutely no mutual exclusiveness there. So that's what I'd say.
Right on. Well, I am sorry to say that we are reaching the end of our programming. So I just want to thank you all, Sandra, Evie, Alyssa, and Joanna. Thank you so much for being here with us today and talking with us and writing your amazing books. They're such great escapes, and we've all needed that a lot lately. So we're just all so grateful for you to be here. And those of you in the audience, thank you so much for being here. And Sam Millers, thank you for sponsoring. So I hope you all have enjoyed the programming. We have the acknowledgements and a thank you from our organizers next. And I hope that you all have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Our pleasure.